Messaged with him today, he knows about it. Thanks, Tim, for coming.
That's it.
Hi, Kathy.
Hi, Levi.
How are you?
Good, how are you?
Doing good?
So the,
Looks like you got a big crowd there tonight.
Your two people so far.
Big crowd.
Dave, how we doing?
I'm trying to get
Did you tell me to click on here to see everybody? You want to
See everybody or to?
well, whether I'm supposed to click something? Don't I? So I don't just see.
Oh, so go to our video, right?
I don't think we're using AC right now.
And then hit.
Thank you.
And then when there are people talking, you might want to pin Aaron too. Because otherwise it's just gonna be them. It won't show, or us, it won't show Aaron or them in the video.
Well.
Okay, oh,
At
admin.
pin, yeah.
When my phone's on. What if that's because I didn't print it out?
And you might have to just switch back and forth. So if Levi is talking, when he's presenting as an applicant, you have to add him. And then unpin him when he's done. Yeah. And I'm not sure if we switch to like gallery view and it shows all of them, what that does to the recording.
Oh,
I'm at like 40%, so
oh, screw.
I thought we looked at the phone for the.
So if Todd, okay, Todd is chair.
Yeah, so he'll probably need to be pinned too, yeah. But typically I'll have council pinned as well as any remote counselors. Yeah. And then if we have like a presenter, I'll pin them and unpin the rest. It's just a lot of mouse clicking.
I'm, Kathy, I'm always for just bringing another device to look at the full packet.
Say that again?
Oh, if you ever are printing a bunch of packets, I'll just bring a digital copy.
Okay, so no paper packet for you.
Yeah,
Got
no
it.
paper packets.
Thank you.
Yeah, save you some time.
Save a tree.
Well, Kathy, are we ready to start over there?
Yes, everyone is here.
Awesome. Well, let's call the meeting to order. And I guess the first thing on our agenda is the approval of the minutes for March 14th. Wow, that was a long time ago.
Yeah.
Do I hear a motion for that?
I'd like to make a motion to approve minutes.
Second.
I love that. Let's call a vote. Who agrees to the minutes? Say aye. Aye?
Aye.
Must be a weird lag. Okay. The meeting minutes are approved. And now we have some new business. We have the public hearing. We have two public hearings. So I will read the planning commission procedures, right, Kathy?
Yes.
And we're gonna start out with Levi's one. So good evening. My name is Todd Bouchard, and I am the chair for the planning commission. I will be presiding over this hearing. This is the time and place for the public hearing in the matter of Herman Creek Lane LLC site plan review, case number LU 24-003, an application by Levi Strayer. This hearing is now open. Oregon land use law requires several items to be read into the record at the beginning of every public hearing. Aaron Carpenter, the city's planning consultant, will review this material. Your patience is appreciated as he goes through these statements. Hey, Aaron, you're up.
Thank you, Chair. An issue which may be the basis for an appeal to LUBA shall be raised no later than the close of the record at or following the final evidentiary hearing on this case. Such issues shall be raised with and accompanied by statements or evidence sufficient to afford the commission and those in attendance an adequate opportunity to respond to the issue. Failure of an applicant to raise constitutional or other issues with sufficient specificity for the city to respond to the issues shall prohibit the applicant from seeking damages in circuit court. The applicable substantive criteria upon which this case will be decided are found in the Cascade Locks Development Ordinance, Section 8-6.148. The specific criteria are summarized in the staff report and will be reviewed at this meeting. All testimony and evidence received during this public hearing must be directed toward this approval criteria or to such other rule, law, regulation, or policy which you believe applies. This case will proceed with the staff report, followed by the applicant's presentation. The applicant may have additional people participate in making this presentation. This is followed by testimony of those who are in support of the application. All of those opposed to the application will then be allowed to speak. This is followed by those with general comments who are neither for nor against this application. The commission, staff, and participants may ask questions of those who testified. All questions are directed through the commission chair, meaning you must ask the commission chair for permission to ask the question. Finally, the applicant and only the applicant will be entitled to a rebuttal. The applicant is entitled to 20 minutes to make their presentation. All other speakers should try to limit comments to 5 minutes. Please try to avoid repetition if someone else has already expressed the same thoughts. It is perfectly acceptable to instead state that you agree with the comments of another speaker. Please be assured everyone will have the opportunity to speak. If you have documents, maps, letters that you wish to have considered by this body, they must formally be placed in the record of this proceeding. To do that, either before or after you speak, please leave the material with staff who will make sure the evidence is entered into the planning record. You must come to the table if you are going to testify or to ask a question. This is so you can be recorded. You must give your name and address before you speak so the record of the hearing can be complete and so you can receive a copy of the final decision. To move the hearing along more efficiently, there are sign-up slips near the entrance. Please fill this out and give it to the city recorder at any time. Prior to the conclusion of the first hearing on a land use application, any participant may request an opportunity to present additional evidence or testimony regarding the application. If such a request is made, it will be up to this body to determine if the hearing will be continued to a time and date certain, or if the record will be kept open for submission of additional evidence or testimony. Kathy, I don't believe we have any additional comments or testimony at this time. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. If the record is kept open, it will be for a minimum of 7 days with a short rebuttal period thereafter afforded to this applicant. Back to you, Chair.
All right, thank you, Aaron. Before we begin with the hearing, I need to ask the audience if there are any objections to the notice that was sent in this case. Are there any objections to the jurisdiction of this body to hear and consider this case? Are there any declarations of conflict or bias by any members of this body? Nope, looks like we're good. We are now ready for the staff report.
Thank you, Chair. This public hearing is for file title LU 24-003 Herman Creek Lane LLC. The request is the proposal would construct a 60-foot by 134-foot two-story steel building within the existing lot. The new building would be broken into 4 roughly equal tenant areas for lease by the building owner and would occupy a portion of the existing lot, which is approximately 8,000 square feet. A new driveway near the center of the property frontage along Herman Creek Lane is proposed, and the area around the new building will be paved. This project location is off of Herman Creek Lane, address 15 Northeast Herman Creek Lane in Cascade Locks. The applicable review criteria is Cascade Locks Community Code Section 8-6.84.040, Article 3, and Article 5. That's 8-148. Okay, so the land use findings, I will give you our quick staff summary. Staff has reviewed the proposed steel building and site improvements and have recommended conditions of approval to address the city's minimum access requirements and to address light industrial design requirements. For brevity, I'm going to read the code title, but then go straight to the findings. If we want to review the code more in depth, I'm all ears and we can read that into the record as well. But we'll start with Article 2 for procedures. For processing development actions, we find the proposed development to the site as stated is subject to a site plan review, an action involving a review by this body, the Planning Commission of Cascade Locks. And Article 3, Cascade Locks Community Development Code 8-6.84 Light Industrial Zone. The proposed steel building would be an additional location for industrial or commercial services within the city, providing further employment opportunities for the community. The applicant has not indicated what specific uses are proposed within the building. Permitted uses in the light industrial zone are outlined in the code, and they include manufacturing and production, industrial services, accessory buildings, parking lots. Conditional uses include utilities, public facilities. All uses would be subject to the approval criteria set forth in Chapter 8-6.148. Next code section are the dimensional requirements. We find that the dimensional requirements of the light industrial zone apply to this site. The site plan included in the application suggests a building setback of approximately 38 feet, shown in the drawing from edge of building to the property line. Setbacks will be confirmed at time of building permits measured from the proposed buildings to the edge of the determined right-of-way line. Application materials also indicate that the proposed structure would have a height of approximately 26 feet. The site plan also estimates the existing lot coverage to be approximately 81.5% and approximately 1,900 square feet of new impervious area added to the site. The dimension requirements are met with this application. Moving on to Article 4, Development Standards. The first one we'll look at are the landscaping and beautification requirements. We find the proposed development is subject to the site plan and therefore also subject to landscape standards as stated. These submittal requirements for landscape plans, the applicant has provided a set of preliminary permit drawings that include landscape plans. The landscape plans show the location of the landscape areas and provides a description and method of installation, maintenance, and maintenance of the proposed vegetation. As a condition of approval, a complete plant list with plant locations shall be submitted with building permits. Next development standard are for street trees. We find the applicant is proposing to develop a site fronting on Herman Creek Lane, which is a public street. Street trees are required along Herman Creek Lane as a condition of approval. The planting of street trees must meet city requirements at time of building permit application submittal. Kathy, I do want to note there's a typo in the finding and the condition. It's stated they'll be submitted at time of site plan review. That should read building permit application submittal.
Okay.
Moving on to buffering and screening. The site is, the applicant has provided a set of permit drawings. The code indicates new development in the light industrial zone needs to meet the B10 buffering standards when abutting a commercial zone. The property directly east of the project site is commercially zoned. However, the properties are separated by Herman Creek Lane, the public right-of-way, and buffering is not required between these zones. Landscaping for parking, loading, and service areas are discussed later below. Next development requirements are the parking and loading requirements. The parking requirements require that the minimum required parking for industrial services use is 1 space per 2,000 square feet of floor area, or 4 spaces minimum. In the application materials, including the narrative and site plan drawings, shows that there will be 5 parking spaces. The applicant's site plan indicates that 5 spaces would be provided, which meets the code. This will be a condition of approval and will be confirmed at time of building permits. Parking dimension standards. I'm going to kind of summarize these next ones because we can skip forward a little bit. But parking dimension standards on the site plan, it shows that they meet the requirement. They'll be confirmed at time of building permits, along with handicap spaces, and bicycle parking is not shown on the site plan and will be required as a condition of approval at time of building permits. Let's see. Okay, a couple more design standards here. Circulation and access. The applicant is proposing to pave a new 30-foot access entrance to replace the existing entrance, which would be abandoned from Herman Creek Lane. The code requires access standards for non-residential uses and requires a minimum easement width of 30 feet. The proposed easement providing access meets this minimum requirement. The vision clearance requirement. Standards for this chapter will be applicable for all development, including the construction of new structures. The applicant proposes to have a 30-foot access from Herman Creek, and the visual clearance is met. The geologic hazard overlay zone requirement, state of Oregon. Let's see, geologic hazards were identified using Dogami's HazView map. Affected areas for geologic hazards within the property apply to earthquake hazards. The property, including proposed structures within an area ranked as very strong. The applicant submitted a City of Cascade Locks geological hazard waiver with their application and acknowledged the existing geological hazard and releases the city from liability. And moving on to signs. The applicant does not propose any new sign, site or building signage with the site plan review application. This section will apply if they propose any new signage later on down the road. Traffic impact analysis. The applicant provided a memo stating the anticipated number of daily trips for the proposed tenants within the new building. A warehouse use is planned for 1 tenant space with an anticipated 0 to 3 semi-truck trips per day. The second tenant space is for a bicycle rental shop with an anticipated 10 to 20 trips per day during the peak summer season, with fewer trips during off-season months. The combined trip counts total under the threshold that necessitates a traffic impact analysis. As such, that analysis is not required for the site plan review. As a condition of approval, the applicant shall provide the city with daily trip counts for any new tenants. Should the cumulative peak hour trips of this property exceed the threshold of 50 peak hour trips, the city may require a traffic impact analysis before occupancy. Moving on to Article 5, Development Review. Let's skip a little bit. They have provided the minimum requirements for submittal and all right. Sorry, I just wanted to save a little time for us, but additional submittal requirements include site plan that's included. The minimum requirements are met. Site plan permit set includes the location of the surrounding properties and adjacent streets. The site is bounded by the Union Pacific Railroad to the south, Herman Creek to the east, Atwell Street to the north. There are power line easements along the western boundary and to the northern buildings from the Atwell Street, Herman Creek Lane intersection. The project extents are within the entirety of the project parcel and do not impact the existing easements. The project extents include the locations and dimensions of the entrances, parking and circulation, loading areas, and above ground utilities. A sidewalk serves the building, providing pedestrian access from the parking areas to the building entrances. The site plan includes the location of the proposed building in relation to the public right-of-way with setback dimensions as noted in the site plan. There are additional structures on the project parcel. However, they are more than 25 feet from the proposed building. Enhanced landscaping is planned for the existing drainage area in the southeast portion of the property. These provisions are met. Additional development requirements include a grading plan. This permit set did not include a grading plan. However, the applicant does not propose to change the existing grade, and they will be required to provide an erosion control plan at time of building permits. Architectural elevations were included with the plan set. Landscape plan was included with the plan set. And the applicant provided the development. The applicant provided a landscape plan that identifies locations of new landscaping areas on the site, including the types and sizes of the proposed plants. The landscape plan indicates the new landscaping will be served by an automatic irrigation system. That provision is met. A Type B construction permit will be required as part of the Cascade Locks Public Works design and construction standards, and that will be as part of that building permit plan set. So, based on the findings and conclusions provided herein, staff concludes that this proposal has met the minimum criteria to be eligible for a development permit in the light industrial zone. The Planning Commission may approve the site plan and request for a development permit subject to the following conditions as enclosed in your application packet. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. So the time for the applicant's testimony. Is the applicant there?
Yes. You want to take over, Levi, or you want me?
Sure, I can give just kind of a brief overview. I think a lot of it was covered there in the application details, but overall, new 8,000 square foot building along the Herman Creek Lane. This past couple years, we lost a 9,000 square foot building in that lot. And so we're looking to build back and improve the quality and really get the standard up to what has been represented further down the Herman Creek Lane with the development that the port has been doing. And I think this building matches that quality standard in order to upgrade kind of the development and opportunities for business to come into that area down Herman Creek Lane. So that's our intention. That's where we're headed. And I think this is a great first step in that direction.
Very good.
Okay, thank you.
Chair, can I was just wondering if you wanted me to speak a little bit more about the project.
You
I
can.
guess that's up to you.
Sorry. Yeah, I represent Bob Sorg and Levi Strayer. I'm Greg with Simmerdat Construction, and we're gonna be doing the building. You were addressing what the building was gonna be used for. We have two tenants. One is a rental unit, e-bikes. And they're just kind of starting out, and then we have a stove company, which is more of like a wholesale company, and so the impact in the roads and everything is gonna be the same at this point. The building is 34 by 60 by 134, 2 stories. It'll have a small office in the front, and it will match the existing buildings down the road, similar to the port. So we're trying to keep everything to look really nice, and it will improve the area. The buildings in there are kind of run down on that side, and so this will, I think, really increase the value of other people's property, and it'll just be a nice benefit to the community. I think it's gonna be a beautiful building. It'll be very similar to the port buildings down the road, and they'll have four individual units in this building. We're gonna do we're having Tennyson Engineering do a runoff for a storm drain, and so all that we should be able to submit that in the next week. I don't know how that'll impact the permit process, if that's gonna be an issue. I don't know who that would be to talk to on that.
I think that would fall under our building permit purview at this point.
Okay.
Yeah, what we would do is we would get all that information with the building permit application and the type B permit, and then our engineer would actually be reviewing those things.
Okay, so that would be to the next step.
Yeah, it would be we would want all of that stuff before we sign off on the building permit
Okay,
application.
wonderful. All right, well, thank you everyone for coming. We appreciate it, and it's very nice to be able to meet in after hours. So, but if you have any questions,
Okay, thank you.
yeah, appreciate it.
Yeah. At this time, do we have any proponents in the audience there to talk about the project?
We have no audience.
We have no audience.
I mean, we have no.
Do we have any?
We have an audience, but we
Then-
don't have any other the applicant.
All right, well, I'm going to ask if there's any opponents' testimony. It's probably not, but I should ask anyway. Any opponents' testimony? Okay, looks like there's none. Okay. Well, the staff doesn't have to respond to the testimony because there isn't any, but I guess maybe we should discuss it as the Planning Commission. Anybody have any questions, concerns that they want to throw up to our planner?
Yeah, I'm curious if there's been any consideration towards what future tenants' approval or review might look like with regards to ongoing capacity and maintaining that use.
Sure. I'll speak, and then Chair, if you see appropriate, maybe the applicant can also respond to their idea for future use. But thank you for that question, Commissioner. I'm sorry, I didn't catch your name.
Michaela Keller.
Hi, thank you. Yes, future tenant use, if it's a use allowed by right within the light industrial zone, they would just apply for, their business license and wouldn't need further land use review. If it's a conditional use, they would come to this body for a conditional use permit approval. Did that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
I guess I have a question. So we're doing the bike shop is the conditional use here, and the rental shop, is that a conditional use as a retail rental shop? Or is that just, are we saying this is allowed use?
Aaron?
I'm sorry. Oh, sorry. The question was, is the rental shop allowed use?
In light industrial, is that an allowed use, or is that, are we doing the conditional use for the bike shop right now?
It's an allowed use in the industrial zone.
Got it. I guess I had a few questions here about the outside of the building, civil engineering. One, is there a sidewalk required on the street along the length of the property?
We did have some back and forth on that, and we are going to require sidewalk. Kathy, please step in if I misspeak, but I believe that was the requirement that we are asking of the applicant to provide.
I know when we all met, the applicant had said that they would rather not do that, but I think that it was discussed at the meeting that was a requirement.
And just to jump in there, Aaron and Kathy, when we were discussing that, the initial intention was to, again, the way the site's designed is to have the asphalt directly off the road for immediate access into the building, just like the port property to the east of that lot. Whether the sidewalk criteria plays into part on the corners on the edges of that, I think those are the areas that would be up for discussion relative to that requirement. But I think the majority of the off-street is directly asphalt coming into the property, just like that port building across the road.
And I think that we talked about when the port did their buildings, they were, there was some deal made that they could put off the sidewalk until the street was brought up to standard, and a possibility that, we could maybe do the same agreement.
Yeah, I think our intention.
We haven't dug further into that, but that was mentioned at that meeting.
Yeah.
In fact, semis, they wouldn't be able to get in if there was a sidewalk. There's all overhead doors in the front of the building. Wouldn't be able to get into them.
Yeah, I think it's we're landscaping that southeast corner of the area of the building. That's where the trees and the landscaping would come into play. And if there's, a section there that would then tie into the future development down Herman Creek Lane, that could come in the future. I think right now, getting it set so that it's, we're building that quality and having the right conformance to the location where the building's in, I think we could address that. But, the majority of that is where it would be paved in right off the road. So I'm not sure how you want to address that.
I'm thinking of like other buildings that the port recently did, the, Flex building. And then the Freedom Building, they have those sidewalks along there. And when the area does get busy, people park along the street and they walk on the sidewalk. And I'm just curious as to whether that's a possibility here that, hey, if the bike rental shop has a lot of people coming to the business and there's currently 4 spaces, 1 handicap. Well, if there's 4 units, if each one of those units has 1 person, that's your 4 spaces and 1 handicap. Where are the people for the bike rental place parking? And are we paving a sidewalk so they can park along the street? Or is there some other parking that you guys have not listed here? Or I don't know, what's the parking situation?
Yeah, it's a great question, Dave. And we don't anticipate any on the street parking there because there's plenty on-site parking. Once you pull into the building, there's the area to the south of the building, a lot of gravel access for parking on site that's off street. So we would anticipate all that parking to be off street as opposed to parking on the street and walking into the property.
Where's the parking?
If you
I see the 5 spaces, so where's it in proximity to those 5 spaces?
I'm sorry, I don't have the drawing in front of me, but there's significant space to the south of the building in terms of parking along the south end of the building. Of course, there's parking in front of the building, and even around the further to the south, past the west end of the building, would be parking available too.
So, yeah, I guess that's still my number 1 question is how the circulation access and parking for a lot of these spaces work.
This building in the back might be tore down and it's not gonna be right away. But there's gonna be double or triple the parking in the back. But
you can park along the backside possibly.
yes,
And then there's a sidewalk to access that from the side of the building there.
right.
So you might,
Yeah, that's where the excess, that's probably where most of the bike people come in, is right on that backside.
yeah, or other, I mean, I don't know
So
what
that's
other
the-
businesses you're gonna have there, but then, where are all the employees of the business? They're gonna park on the backside and they're gonna walk around the building from the front.
So I don't know, that's up to Bob and Levi, but they're planning on taking this building down.
And then what about you mentioned something about semi, so there's semi traffic coming into the lot. And then they're gonna go,
Well, that's the
I guess
impact,
the other buildings here are,
that's gonna be the impact if we have a sidewalk with trees in the front, it's gonna be very hard for a semi to back in, it won't be hard for a car.
you're saying these buildings are gonna have semis back up to them.
Well, she has a warehouse for stoves, and I don't know how many trucks she has, a couple a week or so, and so she has to get in there.
Yeah, and Dave, that business is not semi truck. It's more like a lift gate, smaller lift gate truck. Yeah, similar to what the operation is really across the street. So they can pull in there and load them, I guess horizontal or parallel to the building in the parking lot, so they can pull in, load, and move out. And that's really the same intention that we have with that operation in that building. You're not going to have full like 53 foot semis trying to back up to those and load. It's just not the intention.
So, all right, and I see here number 2 is another access way. So for all the storage that Bear Mountain has and other stuff, I think Bear Mountain's still there, right?
Yeah, that operation would really be unaffected. It would continue to operate the same as it is. The semi trucks would pull through, and they load in the back by the buildings that are rented by Bear Mountain. So really no impact to how that operation is affected or traffic in and out. And nor parking, all their parking is on that portion of the property as well.
I mean, could there be a sidewalk where, where it's like the sidewalk, you can, it's graded, right? It's 30 feet wide still, just keep the existing plan right there, but then have that, a sidewalk that extends the rest of the property down each way along the proposed lot.
Yeah, there are a couple of things to probably consider there. There's the plan that the city had with the railroad crossing and to level that out. If that ever comes back to fruition, that really changes that entryway. So I don't think implementing sidewalks there, nor do we want to probably direct people walking across the railroad tracks in that direction. So, I probably wouldn't get into that development in terms of where you want to put sidewalks, but and then once you get further into the lot, that's where the grade goes directly into the building. And then past that, I think we could address as we further improve the lot and the Herman Creek Lane frontage. But right now, that's all going to be continued to be leased and operated by Bear Mountain, in which the fence would run parallel to Herman Creek. So really no change to that portion of the property past the recommended building right now.
Is there gonna be a fence along the front street here where you're doing the construction?
The fence will be removed along the front street because that becomes the access. That becomes paved right off Herman Creek into the front of the building. So the fencing in that portion where the new building goes will be removed. But
And
the
then
fencing.
north and
Yeah,
south of there in this diagram here that would remain there, or that would be also removed?
explain that again because I don't have the map in front of me. I'm sorry.
So the 30-foot new entrance that you're proposing on the Herman Creek, just north of there and just south of there, all the way down to the vegetation, and then all the way up to where I don't know if you guys are doing new asphalt, but the proposed circulation plan.
Yeah, to the south there is where the landscaping will be. So that the fencing to the south of where the new building and the access easement or the access area would go, that fencing would be removed. To the north of that fencing would remain.
And is
Does
this
that
all
make sense?
asphalt that's going in here?
Yes,
Because isn't it asphalt right now?
no,
Oh.
gravel.
I've never
Yeah.
been there. There's been-
Yeah, it's really gravel right up to the fence, and then there's a couple foot section between the fence and the current road.
So would you guys, your asphalt here would be joining directly to the road then?
That's correct.
The length of the property has asphalt now, joining from the vegetation area all the way up to, is that a second vegetation area there?
Oh, yes, next to
They're
the,
butted by vegetation areas on both sides, and then asphalt all along the street. So this little curve here where it says a 30-foot axis there. Really, it's just asphalt the whole length, right?
That's correct. Yeah.
You drive out there, the building past it on.
Yeah, it's the same thing, right?
Exactly.
Yeah,
Same
situation. Which is yes. It used to be a recycling place. When
Yeah,
it
they're
was
moved out of there
recycling place, I
now.
will say it was kind of complicated because they would have lots of trucks coming and going. And the street and their driveway blended into one
Yeah.
property. And if you were biking or walking, or even if you're driving up to the property. Like every time they were backing up dump trucks nonstop, right? So they're driving in, and the street was their essentially part of their loading zone. So, and so that's one of my concerns here is that the ports building and the way they did things ended up not creating
It's not delineated.
it's not.
Yeah, I think that, in a lot of conversations with the port, Dave, in regards to that specific tenant, there were a number of issues, you know, outside of what you're talking about, just with that tenant alone. You know, I think we have to be very particular in terms of what the operation is, in terms of the use coming into the building, um, and to make sure that it's an appropriate use and fits the layout and the building and what we're intending to be put in there too. You know, I mean, that conversation with the port went on for years over that tenant in terms of, you know, trying to get them in a more suitable space for the business they were trying to operate. It was never really a good fit for what they got put in there for. So I agree with you with the situation that happened there, but certainly not what we envision happening in this building.
They took up the parking lot. They took up the parking lot with puddles and clothing and boxes. They made it more difficult than it should have been.
Oh, you're talking about the renewal.
Recycling.
Yeah.
There's a renewal workshop and there was there was another place that was recycling cardboard.
Yeah, that's who I'm talking about, the recycling.
When the renewal and the t-shirt one. Or I don't know, maybe they were.
So.
Aaron?
Just a comment to what you just made with regards to. Your job is to make sure that you're vetting tenants. The code is designed to identify who can go there and what that looks like. And so the use may be allowed outright. And I think in the case of, you know, the cardboard, perhaps that was the situation. So with regards to who owns the building or how that works, it's whether or not they're allowed to be there. And then if they choose to move forward with the private owner, that's a different situation. But Dave's point about how do we make sure that at this point that the road and any concerns about anything related to that are addressed is tied to the code and what's required and how that gets established and codified in this decision. And so you can be a good tenant, you can be a good owner, you can have good intentions, but the next property owner may not be aware of those things. They may not have the capacity to do that, and they may not have the interest to do that. So this is our opportunity to establish those conditions that relate to the standards in the code. And so I think, you know, Dave brings forward some really good comments, and I don't know what that looks like as far as addressing it. Perhaps the contract planner has some suggestions.
Yeah, one that would normally come through in the change of use. If there's a new tenant come in, then it gets addressed at that point.
Adding sidewalks?
No, in terms of the actual use and the tenant and the use of the property.
Aaron?
If I may, a
Yeah.
tenant change would not trigger requirements to install frontage improvements, including sidewalks. Now would be the time for the city to require street improvements with this new development. From our conversations, we again, I don't want to speak for Kathy or Jordan, but the conversation was not that we would require street improvements with this project. That being said,
I guess Mike, I got a question here about this 30-foot driveway. Like, isn't there normally like the access to the street is limited, right? Like, you can only access in a 30-foot zone, but then this is all paved. So I'm like, well, the whole thing is the whole street is just a complete access. It's not. I mean, even though it's marked as this is our 30 feet of access, you could enter and exit the whole width of their property.
No, you gotta go between two buildings. If you wanna go between into the place, if you wanna go to the front, yes, you're right, you're correct. But if you wanna go into the place, you have to go between two buildings.
But when we're talking about semis and loading or facilitating tenant involvement, are they not loading from the front? From the east? Loading with doors on the east facing side of these, am I looking at that correctly?
Yes.
Or, okay, so that's where the semis would be, so someone could
And
drive.
there's small trucks is what Levi was saying.
Yeah,
It's the street access is the whole front of the property, except for the vegetation area,
Correct.
is the street access. Not a 30-foot access, it's a,
That's
I
just
mean,
to
that's
get
probably like
into
a
the property.
200-foot access.
Yeah, that's a requirement from.
So you met the 30-foot access, but it's really, your access is the whole street. So my concern here would be that because there's no identified entrance and exit, and the whole thing essentially is an entrance and exit, you can run into traffic and collision and people problems where, you know, you don't know. If you can just drive from the street to in
Yeah, but
anywhere,
it's
like,
just straight in, it's not, it's,
but the whole building, you're saying the road is paved and then it goes all the way.
but
So there's no defined entrance. So like, I mean, you go to Walmart and there's like aisles, there's parking spaces, there's entrance and exits. But this whole frontage is just one giant, I mean, somebody
well,
could,
one reason why, and I know you probably will say that doesn't mean anything, but right across the street, that building was done
Yeah.
just a few years ago, and that's what it
and I
is.
think that's a
And then you
major
go,
problem
and
is,
then down the road, the next building to the port is the same way, and the next one
Yeah.
after that's the same way.
Well, but this is our opportunity to address that if it needs to be fixed, and if
But
it speaks to a path to do that.
But it's a real impact to have that, cause I build buildings, I have a building that was done that way, and we put an exit out, but you can't get in with a truck, and it's really extremely hard to maneuver into a spot where you're locked in. Especially on the, if you got overhead doors, and you have to have trucks for people that are coming and going for their business.
yeah.
It creates another impact.
And I'm not sure why you think a wider entrance would be more hazardous, because.
No, he's saying can't buildings, cause you can just drive in. and
Yeah,
everyone go.
But what I'm saying,
That's not.
there's no sight and hindrance or anything. You can drive in here just as safely as you could drive in the next one. I mean, you could drive in all along there safely. There's no reason, because it's wide, that it becomes unsafe.
I think in practice, having driven there and understanding what, you know, what is going forward. There's no delineation between where the driveway starts or where the access starts and where the road is, where the right of way is. Right, so I think that's can be confusing with regards to safety and access, like someone looking to pass by. Perhaps there's a way to address what I'm looking at. Wondering if the condition number 3 with regards to the parking spaces and the standard that comes with, if there's any opportunity to bolster that to better understand or better define what it is that we're trying to bring forward. Especially considering that there's opportunity to confirm that further at the building permit time. Aaron, is that something you have any thoughts on?
I think part of the design issues comes down to the final design for Herman Creek Lane and how curb and gutter, all of that cross section will look like. And so to require those types of improvements that define the space of the entryway would potentially all be modified by the final build out of Herman Creek Lane. So that's why those improvements can happen when Herman Creek Lane is paved to its fullest extent. So for those parking requirements, there are requirements for wheel stops, for landscape strips. You'll see there are landscape strips that provide that buffer. It's a raised curb, it looks like. Is that correct, Levi?
Next to the building is where you're talking about?
Next to the building, but then on the east and west, kind of the arms of the park.
Yeah, around the edges of the building you're talking about.
Right. Yeah.
North and south edges, really, and the east side.
Right, but the parking stalls are going to have. It looks like, again, some sort of buffer between where the parking stall is, and then where the access drives are.
Yeah, I'm not sure I'm totally tracking with you there. I mean, you have the buffer between the parking stalls and the building itself. But I'm not sure parking stall to where you're defining there. Sorry.
It's called the apron. They're calling it apron.
Yeah, I believe the architect drew it in.
Is that not intended to be part of this?
We were planning on doing it because that's what he put in. It's just a concrete apron. And I
Oh,
think-
you're talking the building apron on the east side of the building? Is
Yeah,
that
just
correct?
a little curve that goes out, just basically for parking to. And then there's gonna be a little bit of plants planted in it too. It's not very big.
I can't read the measurement.
Yeah, it's the length of a car
18 feet?
roughly.
Well, I think
That was the
helps to.
Sorry.
Part of what you're talking about, Dave.
Wait, sorry, you're talking about the sidewalk alongside the building?
No, it's these two little lips. Those two little lines that pull out.
yeah. That's what I was trying to show.
Corner circle.
No, but I think
The
that's,
corner circle is like title, that's the name of it, but this is like a straight out. So they'll go out to the road is what it looks like.
no, but I think they just indicated that so they could indicate the 30-foot driveway entrance, but it's paved from vegetation to vegetation. A direct match of the street.
Well, it's identified as well, yeah, I don't know.
Well, that gives you 30
That's
feet.
the-
You want
But they're just saying, hey, we have 30 feet of entrance on this curve right here. But then so my concern is that the street needs to be protected as the street, right? And one of the issues with this lot up here is as soon as the street and the parking lot get combined, you don't know if you're on a street or if you're in an industrial zone. And if you have a forklift driver who's backing up and loading, well,
Yes.
if it's all one paved surface, it's no longer a street anymore. It becomes part of the industrial zone, and the city and the access to other buildings gets lost.
It's 50 feet, over 50 feet on the one end.
Chair, can I speak, please?
It's,
Chair?
Yes.
Can I
Yes,
make
go
a
ahead.
suggestion? Can I make a suggestion?
Yeah.
With the type B permit application, the applicant's engineer will have to supply plans. They'll have to submit plans to the city for their parking lot, their entrance, their sidewalks, all of those engineer plans have to come with that type B permit application. So their engineer is going to be looking at the access. Our engineer is going to be looking at those plans and approving them or not approving them. So I guess what I'm trying to say is I think this would be handled by engineers with that type B permit application. That make sense?
Is there opportunity?
Yes.
And then otherwise provide feedback related to that based on, what is it, what code is that based on? This building? permit?
Public Works Design Standards. So your code, you're dealing with the amount of feet access into. That's what your purview is. The engineer says how it's done.
But the drawing here says it's confusing because really it's the whole length of the property, which is 250. But the minimum or the driveway is 30.
Right, this is their site plan review and what they've drawn up for you to look at their building and meet the code requirements. Their type B permit application will be for street, sidewalks, storm drain, pavement, all of that stuff. So I think what I'm trying to say is an engineer is gonna be looking at this site and saying, we have to have this entrance and exit marked. I mean, I think they're gonna say that.
Yeah.
And point of clarification, the 30-foot is a minimum requirement, not a maximum.
You know, there, I
Yeah,
think,
so the maximum, how many entrances you're allowed? Can you have an unlimited just whole property entrance?
It's not in the planning code. That would be part of the public works design construction standards.
they're gonna look at that and say how far away from the tracks their entrance should be and how the distance between their entrance and exit from the next entrance and exit, that's what the engineers look at.
There's no maximum.
I don't know about that. I'm just saying, I think the engineers are gonna look at that.
The calculations with regards to how close access points can be. Depending on the type of road.
There's no maximum in the planning code.
You say there's no maximum.
No, but in the public works design standard,
Oh, per public works design standards has a maximum.
they probably have a calculation they use to say access points have to be so far apart.
Yes,
So that would speak to a limiting factor.
Yeah.
And Aaron, is it safe to say that from the staff's opinion, the project meets the criteria for the zoning and planning with the caveat of your recommendations, conditions of approval?
That's correct, Chair.
Okay, all right. So should we close the hearing and have commissioners debate, deliberation? Let's do that. Let's close the hearing, and then commissioners, what do you think? Should we approve this with the conditions that Aaron has laid out, or do we need to add something, or what do you think?
I think the conditions as presented address the standards and speak to all of the points whereby a standard or provision wasn't met outright. And to that, I think it's appropriate to move forward.
Okay, what do you think, Dave?
For me, it's just the street side vegetation, and the streetscape is the thing that I'm most concerned about. And I'm, the vegetation does touch the street on a number of this area, but they go straight back and it provides a big asphalt area between the two trees. So, if we could have some condition that preserves the street as a street and that property as that property, and do it through engineering, I would certainly approve that just to preserve if you're walking on the street, if you're, whether you're walking on your property or driving a forklift on your property, you can access it, but you driving the forklift from the property to the street to the property to the street is not what's gonna happen. It's just in that 130-foot driveway.
You know, on the conditions of approval, number 15 talks about the type B application. Would be reviewed by the city. Would that come back to the planning commission or go?
no, the type B permit is Public Works and our engineer.
Yeah.
And the engineer is gonna protect what street we have.
Okay,
I mean, that's their job.
that's their job.
Yeah.
I was wondering if there's another way to look at it to make sure David's concerns are mentioned and that we know it's in there for approval. I mean,
Well, the engineer will be made aware of this
Right.
meeting. They're gonna be able to look at the minutes. They can watch the video. And, like I said, they have their whatever they have to do, but I mean, they're gonna make sure that cars aren't going in and out all along the whole property.
sure.
They're just gonna make sure that doesn't happen.
Are you okay with that, Dave?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, if cars aren't going on, I think we just gotta keep the street safe, and I'm all for that. So you're saying it's gonna get done in, some plan review on site B, as you guys know that, there's gonna be the construction plan of how things enter and exit, and we'll just hand that over to Kathy in the city, so.
The engineer.
Okay, then is there a motion to accept the staff report with the conditions of approval?
I move that we accept the, staff report with the 15, conditions of approval and all the exhibits that have been submitted.
Second that?
Okay, nice. Yeah, is there a second?
Yes.
Michaela seconded.
Oh, Michaela, thank you, Michaela. Okay, well, all for this motion, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Looks like there's no opposed, Kathy. Looks like we have approved this.
Okay.
All right, I think this one's completed then. And we are moving on to the second piece, is the other hearing for the sign variance.
Thank you for your consideration.
Nice.
Thank you all.
We're down here. Yeah.
Yeah, you're done.
Thanks, guys. Have a good day.
You too. Thank you, Todd.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Okay, so we're going to move on to the public hearing for the LU 24-008 Ixtapa sign variance. And I'll start by reading the Cascade Locks Planning Commission procedures. So good evening, my name is Todd Bouchard and I am Chair of the Planning Commission. I will be presiding over this hearing. This is the time and place set for the public hearing in the matter of the Ixtapa sign variance case number LU 24-008, an application by Juan Barraras. This hearing is now open. Oregon land use law requires several items to be read into the record at the beginning of every hearing. Aaron Carpenter, the city's planning consultant, will review this material. Your patience is appreciated as he goes through these statements. Aaron?
Thank you, Chair. An issue which may be the basis for an appeal to LUBA shall be raised no later than the close of the record at or following the final evidentiary hearing on this case. Such issues shall be raised with and accompanied statements or evidence sufficient to afford the Commission and those in attendance an adequate opportunity to respond to the issue. Failure of an applicant to raise constitutional or other issues with sufficient specificity for the city to respond to the issues shall prohibit the applicant from seeking damages in circuit court. The applicable substantive criteria upon which the case will be decided are found in the Cascade Locks Development Ordinance, Section 8-6.160 and 8-6.144. The specific criteria are summarized in the staff report and will be reviewed at this hearing. All testimony and evidence received during this public hearing must be directed toward this approval criteria or to such other rule, law, regulation, or policy which you believe applies. This case will proceed with the staff report followed by the applicant's presentation. The applicant may have additional people participate in making this presentation. This is followed by testimony of those who are in support of the application. All of those opposed to the application will then be allowed to speak. This is followed by those with general comments who are neither for nor against this application. The Commission, staff, and participants may ask questions of those who testified. All questions are directed through the Commission Chair, meaning you must ask the Commission Chair for permission to ask the question. Finally, the applicant and only the applicant will be entitled to a rebuttal. The applicant is entitled to a 20 20 minutes to make their presentation. All other speakers should try to limit comments to 5 minutes. Please try to avoid repetition if someone else has already expressed the same thoughts. It is perfectly acceptable to instead state that you agree with the comments or of another speaker. Please be assured everyone will have an opportunity to speak. If you have documents, maps, or letters that you wish to have considered by this body, they must formally be placed in the record of this proceeding. To do that, either before or after you speak, please leave the material with staff who will make sure the evidence is entered into the planning record. You must come to the table if you're going to testify or ask a question. This is so that you can be recorded. You must give your name and address before you speak so the record of the hearing can be complete and so you can receive a full copy of the final decision. To move the hearing along more efficiently, there are sign-up slips near the entrance. Please fill this out and give it to the city recorder at any time. Prior to the conclusion of the first hearing on a land use application, any participant may request an opportunity to present additional evidence or testimony regarding the application. If such a request is made, it will be up to this body to determine if the hearing will be continued to a time and date certain, or if the record will be kept open for submission of additional evidence or testimony. If the record is kept open, it will be for a minimum of 7 days with a short rebuttal period thereafter afforded to the applicant. Back to you, Chair.
Thank you. Before we begin with the hearing, I need to ask the audience if there are any objections to the notice that was sent out in this case. Are there any objections to the jurisdiction of this body to hear and consider this case? Are there any declarations of conflict or bias by any members of this body? No? Okay. We are ready for the staff report, Aaron. Back to you again.
Chair, I just
Yes.
want to let you guys know that there is no one here, no one in the audience at all. So the applicant is not present. Just so you know.
Okay. All right. Well, I noticed there was nothing happening, but I wasn't sure. Okay. Aaron, what do you know?
Thank you, Chair. This is application file number LU 24-008. This is for a sign permit variance within the public zone. The applicable code is for signs 8-6.144 and for variance 8-6.160. The location of this is at Marine Park. This is 299 Southwest Portage Road, the Sternwheeler location. Zoning is public. The lot size is 8.53 acres. The specific action requested. The proposal is to install a wall sign. The applicant proposes to increase the visibility of their business with an illuminated wall sign for the operation of Ixtapa Restaurant. The proposed sign would be placed along the building's facade near the building entrance along Northwest Portage Road. No additional site improvements are proposed with this application. The new sign displays the name of the restaurant. A variance from the maximum wall sign area standard is requested by the applicant. In summary, staff has reviewed the proposed wall sign variance and we recommend conditions of approval to address the city's maximum sign area requirements and findings for a variance of approval. Let's review the land use findings. Article 2, procedures. We find the proposed development to the site located as stated is subject to a variance, an action involving a review by you, this City of Cascade Locks Planning Commission. Article 3, land use districts. This is within public zone. Conditional uses. The site is within the public zoning district and the subject building operates as a cafe restaurant oriented to serving guests of the Sternwheeler cruise ship. the cafe restaurant is an approved conditional use and the proposed wall sign is ancillary to the restaurant and does not require an additional conditional use approval. This criteria is met. Dimension requirements within the public zone. The proposed wall sign meets all the site and building dimensional requirements in the public district. All requirements for setbacks, maximum building height, and maximum building coverage are met for the proposed wall sign. This criteria is met. As discussed in the following code sections, the wall sign requires a variance from the sign dimensional requirements. However, the public zone dimensional requirements are not part of that variance request. Code regarding the floodplain overlay zone, we find according to the firm map for the Columbia River, the project site is not within zone A and is north of I-84. Therefore, this section does not apply. For the wetlands and riparian area code, this project site is not identified as a wetland in the 2004 local wetlands inventory. Therefore, this section does not apply. Now we get into signs. The proposed sign is neither exempt or prohibited based on the provisions of CDC 8-6.144.020 and is subject to review under 8-6.144.030. As discussed below, the proposed sign does not fully comply with the requirements of this chapter and is subject to Planning Commission review. Let's skip with some of those application requirements, but we're going to go to the general sign requirements. The applicant has provided a narrative and sign drawing for the proposed illuminated wall sign. The sign area is approximately 49 square feet, which exceeds the maximum sign area requirement. The sign does not satisfy the requirements. Signs that do not satisfy sign requirements can be approved as a sign code exception or through a variance. The following sections address sign code exception approval criteria and variance submittal requirements. Requirements regarding illumination. The proposed wall sign would include illumination to provide readability of the sign for restaurant patrons. The sign would not include any flashing movements, animation, blinking, or rotating, in which the illumination changes with time, and the sign would not be designed in a manner to simulate motion or produce glare for adjacent properties or to the public street. This criteria is met. The sign location requirements. The applicant indicated in their design drawings that the wall sign is located along the building's facade off of Northwest Portage Road. The proposed wall sign would not be located within the vision clearance area. So this criteria is met. The sign code exceptions. In summary, the sign code exception would allow a sign that's up to 20% over a particular standard would have that 20% allowance. They're well over that 20% allowance, so that gets bumped into a variance. So I'm going to jump to our variance standards. The approval criteria for the variance, we're going to go through A through E. So these are, again, the findings for the variance. I'm going to read the approval criteria and then read my finding. The proposed variance will equally or better meet the purpose of the regulation being modified and any associated policies of the comprehensive plan. The purpose of the sign code is described in the code section, and the purposes are as follows. promote traffic and pedestrian safety, protect property and public welfare, increase the aesthetic value and economic viability of the city, provide for safe construction, location, erection, and maintenance of signs, provide equitable signage rights and reduce signage conflicts, and prevent proliferation of signs and sign clutter. The proposed sign will not interfere with traffic or pedestrian safety, as it is not within the traffic visual clearance area or within any walkways. The proposed sign increases the economic viability of this building as it provides increased visual identification of the business. The visibility of the business from the public right-of-way would be diminished with a smaller sign area. The sign will be installed by professionals and inspected by Hood River County building inspectors to ensure safe installation and maintenance. The wall sign is the only sign on the south elevation and does not contribute to signage conflict and or clutter from Wanapa Street. The proposed variance for the wall sign does not interfere or bias other businesses, as there are no other comparable businesses in Marine Park to this restaurant use. Based on these findings, the proposed sign meets the purposes of the sign code. This variance approval criterion is met. To note, the proposed wall sign is approximately 49 square feet in area. The maximum total sign area for a commercial zone where restaurant use is permitted is 250 square feet for all surfaces, or 8% of the primary building face. For this site, if they were a commercial zone, they would be allowed up to 64 square feet. So they're well below what that comparable signage would be if it was a commercial zone. Again, that's just an aside, not necessarily addressing a code criteria. Variance approval criteria B. There are special circumstances such as peculiar lot size or shape, topographic constraints or limitations caused by existing development over which the applicant has no control and which are not applicable to other properties in the same zoning district. Our finding for this: the Ixtapa restaurant is located off the main Wanapa Street corridor and frontage road in Marine Park, as described in the narrative and confirmed by the Hood River County web map elevations. The local topography and vegetation minimizes the visibility of the restaurant, as the building is approximately 50 feet lower in elevation than Wanapa Street, with heavy tree and shrub coverage. The restaurant is over 600 feet from Wanapa Street and over 1,000 feet from the access road off Portage Road. Distances that minimize the visibility and readability of signage. A larger sign would increase visibility from the road. This variance approval criterion is met. Approval criteria C. The use proposed is a permitted or conditional use as allowed in the applicable zoning district, and the standards of this title will be maintained to the greatest extent that reasonably possible while permitting some economic use of the land. The proposed sign would be placed along the, our findings. The proposed sign would be placed along the front facade of a building used as a restaurant. Restaurants are characterized as retail sales and service, which is conditional use in the public zone, and wall signs are typical for restaurant uses. The installation of the proposed sign does not put this site or buildings or the building out of compliance of other development standards under the public zone. The installation of this sign does not preclude the city enforcing future site or building development standards at this location. The only variance from the applicable sign code is for exceeding the maximum sign area. All other applicable sign standards for this zone are met with this application. This variance approval criteria is met. Criteria D. Existing physical and natural systems such as, but not limited to, transportation facilities, utilities, and sensitive lands will not be adversely affected by any more than would occur if the use or structure were developed in accordance with the provisions of this title. Our finding is the proposed wall sign would be located again on the facade of an existing building. The proposed increase in sign area would not adversely affect physical or natural systems. It does not increase the building height, the building footprint, or the area of disturbance around the building. This approval criteria is met. And our last variance approval criteria is the hardship is not self-imposed, and the variance requested is the minimum variance, which would alleviate the hardship. The building's visibility is not self-imposed by the restaurant tenant. The natural topography and vegetation between the site building and public right-of-way limits visibility as business in the city of Cascade Locks, where the variance would increase the visibility of the business without excessively surpassing the sign code. The requested variance only affects one of the sign requirements, which is the sign area. The requirements for maximum number, height, location are still met by the proposed sign. This variance approval criteria is met. Based on the findings and conclusions provided herein, staff concludes that the proposal has met the minimum criteria to be eligible for a sign permit in the public zone. The Planning Commission may approve the request for a sign permit and a variance from the sign code subject to the following conditions of approval within your packet. Back to you, Chair.
Thank you. So is there anyone representing the applicant?
There is no one here.
Okay. All right. I was wondering if they were zooming in. Is there any proponents of the sign application? No. Are there any opponents to the sign application? Okay, no. Are there any commissioner questions for Aaron?
Excuse me, I have one. Aaron, back,
Okay.
the pages are not numbered, but where it says public zone 8-6, 92.030.
Yes.
And you state that it's a cafe restaurant oriented to serving guests of the Stern River cruise ship. I don't think that's true. They're just gonna serve guests of anybody that wants to come. And I don't want to have this limit in here that they're only gonna serve guests of the Stern River. When they open, I plan to go down there, and I probably won't be on the Stern Wheeler. So,
Absolutely. I
would just say, I take that Stern Wheeler out and just say they were serving guests. Or serving the public.
Happy to do that. I believe the wording was meant to direct more of the historic use of that building.
Oh, sure.
But I understand that, and I can work with Kathy if we want to strike that from this record.
And I don't want to be petty about it, but wordsmithing is sometimes kind of important.
Agreed.
Yeah, so I guess I have a question about the same thing here. Are they asking to be approved for conditional use to use this building for a restaurant? Or you're just saying that this is a conditional use for the use of this land? Because
the restaurant use is already established. We're just acknowledging that a restaurant use in the public zone would require a conditional use permit. That is not what's under review. A conditional use permit is not part of this application.
so
This is just for this sign
that
variance.
conditional use process, if the last time I read the code, I read that if a use is not used for more than a year, it loses its conditional use. So I'm curious as to why we aren't doing a conditional use as a restaurant here. And then on top of that, the previous use of this building was a restaurant, but the manner of the business, it was a gift shop, restaurant, it was a ticketing area. And now that the businesses have changed, parking and circulation has changed. Number of parking spaces required. You know, there's nothing for a vote really, but currently that parking lot gets full, and I'm just curious as to what the impact is going to be on the rest of the park. And I don't know why didn't they file a conditional use permit for their original facility?
That's a great question, Commissioner Lips. There was an administrative review when they came back with the proposed restaurant, and I forget when that was, Kathy, but that was early on when I came on board. That was one of my first projects with the city.
Quite a while ago.
And we did see that they were close to that 1 year timeline. And again, we did that administrative review at that point, and they did not go over the threshold of what would have triggered a brand new conditional use permit that could be reviewed administratively.
But it's been 1 year since then, so it's like an administrative review can just approve something and then the 1 year time period is no longer apply.
Some of that is triggered by when reasonable improvements to the building start. So they're doing improvements to the building, so it wouldn't technically be vacant. Again, the timeline is being paused by their improvement to the building to get it ready for opening, and that's part of the code.
But Aaron, is it true? The only thing we're looking at today is the sign permit, right? Or the sign.
That's right.
The variance for a sign.
Correct.
So
Yes.
that's kind of what's on the table for us right now is the variance for the sign. And you've recommended some conditions of approval and approval of the sign variance. Is that true?
That's correct.
Okay. Any concerns, Commissioner, on the sign issue before us?
Yeah, I guess the sign code generally says we cannot have internally lit sign. It has to be a backlit sign. And if I'm reading this correctly, is this internally lit sign?
Forgive me, I'm pulling up the sign specs.
Maybe it's self-illuminated or.
I think it's channel lighting. So essentially illuminated from behind.
Yeah, I guess that's my biggest concern is I don't have any problem with the size of the sign or where it's located, but it's the light and how much it creates in a park, because it is going to be shiny. So their goal is to make their sign as bright as it can be so you can see it. But if you're walking in the park with your dog and having a wonderful night looking at the stars, you don't necessarily want a sign that is so bright that you know stop was there when you just want to walk your dog. So that's my biggest concern, and unfortunately, there's nothing in the code that, and even in our downtown review committee, we were talking about, can you create some ordinance of how bright a sign can be, and somebody was saying there's no way to actually measure brightness in a bright way that can be standard. So my number one concern is that the sign is going to be too bright, and if you're walking your dog, looking at the stars, all you can see across the whole park is a sign that is lighting the rest of the park. will say it would save the port a lot on electricity because they wouldn't have to turn on their streetlights.
Well, I think that's been brought up before, by your signs of your restaurant, by your neighbors up the street from you.
The our signs? So ours are all lit inside the sign itself, and then they're also on timers. So they turn off and on.
But there was one year you had a sign that was blinking.
Oh, I think my Christmas lights.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
And I know.
They like my Christmas lights.
One of the neighbors had a child that can't take that kind of light from it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and remember she was here.
Yeah.
I don't know if she was here, but she was somewhere where, I remember you were there and she was
Yeah.
really expressing concern about this child.
The Christmas lights,
Yeah.
I stopped doing them now, so no problem.
Yeah, but, there's always.
Aaron,
about
does-
light.
Yes.
Aaron, does their proposed sign meet the sign code?
Aside from the area, yes.
But from the size thing, I mean, regarding the lighting, that seems to be an issue. So is their lighting scheme meet the code for signs now?
Correct.
Okay. So are you the rest of the commissioners? Oh, go ahead.
Wait, how is it? You're saying it's lit with some LED strip. Are the letters themselves the LED strips, or is it? Because I drove past one in Hood River and it was a beautiful sign, and it wasn't overly bright. I just want to make sure that the park is not a giant glowing sign across the park. And I don't know how can we write that in the code that says we want you to have a sign, but please don't blind us all.
I mean,
well, we can't change the code right now in the middle of an application, so we've got to kind of table that for another day. We have to kind of think about what's the code now, and does it or does it not meet this and the variance. So lighting wise, Aaron, I'm hearing you say it meets the current, their idea of the sign will meet the current sign code lighting wise, right? And the only issue is it can be bigger. That's before us. Is that true?
correct.
Okay.
Well, so
Well, commissioners, do you think? Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, I'd just like to read it just so I make sure that we're doing it right. Where is the language for what type of signs are allowed with their lighting types? And what is the language that they're using to describe their signs? So I just want to make sure those line up.
Page 4, B, region.
So I see, sorry, I don't know what page.
It's one of the table on top.
Let's see what's up. We see a lot of things that say illuminated.
At least that's where I read it. Illuminated for the purpose of providing readability of the sign during hours of darkness is allowed, etc.
Yeah, but then it's the type of illumination, which
I don't know.
I think is in we have it in our code of how signs can be illuminated. It used to be that you could only have a sign that was illuminated from a light that was shining on the sign. And then we added a sign that was backlit, so you can have a sign behind the sign, a light behind the sign that backlights it. But the sign itself, how it's illuminated, I thought like the gas stations, how they have their LED signs are. Those are illuminated wall sign would be placed under the facade, I believe.
It says the proposed illuminated wall sign.
That's the finding from staff.
But is it like a neon sign? Is the sign itself just a giant LED light? Like that's
Their channel, each individual letter is a channel. They're 3 inches according to that sign permit. The spec sheet. again, the code for illumination was really more for the flashing, moving, animation, blinking. And that's the sign, again, doesn't go against that illumination code.
What article is signs? Is it 4?
8-6.144 signs. Is the site plan what you're using to identify how it's described? Because I don't see anything written in the narrative they provided that identifies the description of the sign itself. They speak to the variance criteria.
That sheet that you had up with in that text to the right, it has the dimensions of each channel.
Indecipherable on my copy. So if it speaks to what is there, then that may be what we're looking for.
You need a magnifying glass.
One point of clarification with the code is that illumination for the purposes of providing readability of sign during hours of darkness is allowed. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but it's possible that there could be a condition limiting it to hours of operation. That's one way to help with if there's issues with dark sky with the park. So just a thought.
Is there capacity within that standard to provide that as a reasonable condition?
I would look to
That's a good question.
the city attorney, but I would say that would be a reasonable condition, but I'll let commissioners discuss.
And there's nothing in our code, I'll just say.
There's nothing, Kathy, about illumination in our code.
Well, if you go, no, I'm talking about a time limit. If you go to the definition, lighting methods, talks about time, it says lighting methods direct, exposed lighting or neon tubes on the sign face, flashing, lights which blink on and off randomly. Indirect or external, the light source is separate from the sign face or cabinet and is directed toward sign so as to shine upon the exterior surface of the sign. Internal, a source of illumination from within the sign. Internal illumination includes any source from the interior of the sign, behind letters, black lighting, channel lighting, LED, incandescent or fluorescent. And I don't know if you remember, Dave, but because of the new businesses downtown, there were some amendments made to the code regarding signage. Do not be as strict as what it once was.
Got it. So maybe I'm thinking of a previous version of the code that
You may be, because we
that
did change it
restricted
because
the lighting.
of downtown businesses, is why it was amendments were made.
And well, I guess my biggest concern isn't the size or location of the sign, it's how bright it is. And people wanting to enjoy the park, which it is an open zone, and how they can enjoy the park, but also how can they interact with the business? And there's a balance there. Fortunately, there's no easy way to say, hey, you can light your sign, but can you turn it down or not make it too bright? So I guess I'd really like to know if there's any opinion on that. I hate the public to be very ticked off when they're like, hey.
Well, they were
bright.
notified.
And then they say, hey, it got approved.
Well, everyone was noticed within 250 feet of the port, the whole port property, so that was a whole lot of notices that went out.
And there's no standard to speak to that, so we don't have the capacity to condition it. It's a function of what needs to be addressed going forward. If this is the thing that changes that, then that's what we can move towards. But right now, as they submitted, they've addressed the standards.
But they're asking for a variance.
Just for the right, so would you be fine with it if it was a smaller sign but still lit? That's the question.
Yeah.
That's the only thing that we're addressing, unfortunately.
Good point, Michaela. So Commissioner, since we're just dealing with the size of the sign, are we okay with it a little bit bigger as it has been presented?
I guess if it's bigger, that means there's more lights in it.
It's just brighter.
Brighter, which my biggest concern is that might be too bright because of the size, or how it is, and I just want to make sure it's not glaring across the parking lot. I wish they were here to speak to this, and they could say, we don't want to blind you. Yeah, that's my biggest concern, is that it's gonna be too bright, and then people are gonna be walking their dog at night and having a wonderful evening, and then, because their goal is to make it as bright as possible to attract people to their business, right? So their incentive is to make it brighter. But we don't want it to be too bright, right? Like,
We don't have any way to measure that either.
Well, but brightness isn't part of our purview today, I don't think. It's just really the size. So would anybody be willing to make a motion to agree to the variance and the conditions of approval as
Well, you have to
per
close
the
the
staff?
first.
Yeah.
Can you close the
Oh
hearing?
my goodness, you're so right. I'm closing this thing. Let's close it. Let's close it. Okay, commissioners, what do you think? Is someone willing to make a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion that we approve the, Extapa sign variance LU 24-008. And, I want to say that I read Juan, Barajas's letter, and I thought it was a pretty powerful letter. I'm sorry he's not here tonight. And, I think there'll be I'm making an editorial comment, I know, but I think they'll be a good partner for our. And so
Okay, so your motion,
to accept the variance.
is there a second to the motion?
A second.
Okay, thank you, Michaela. So let's do a vote. All in favor of the motion, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
I'm gonna oppose it.
Okay, so one opposed. So what does that do, Kathy, for us?
Well, we have three, we have a,
I guess we have 3-1. Yes.
yes. Three,
All right, so I guess,
one opposed.
all right. So the motion passes. Or yes, for the variance. Okay. All right, I guess that's it. We can close that part out, and then I'm going to ask for public comment if for any, just general comment, but there's nobody there. So then we'll join the, whoa, yes.
You know, I was reading your minutes that I wasn't at in March, I think it was. And,
Yeah.
on page 5, Chairman Seeger said the joint meeting discussion mentioned meeting monthly. And I know we've just had a new election, so we're gonna have new city council people and a new mayor. But it was quite a discussion here that I read about. And, you know, it just bothers me. And I know the city wants to save and needs to save money. But we haven't met since March, and we were gonna have this training, and we were gonna do this, and we were gonna do that. And I know that I kind of like Jordan to talk about what the status of, the whole planning commission and, because Bernard is gonna be on city council, so could you talk about that, Jordan, a little bit about what's gonna be in our future?
I think the original intent was to have a more proactive planning commission that met monthly, did active reviews of the code. And then we started the downtown process, not knowing where that was gonna lead. The idea of the planning commission actively reviewing was essentially put on hold until that was done. And then we would come forward with the proposed changes to the downtown zone mainly, and then once that's finalized, then look at the rest of the code. That's where planning commission would step back in as a more active role.
I think it mentioned something about June. Last June.
Yeah.
Is the downtown project the piece that there's grant association?
Yes, we got a grant from the Oregon Department of Land Development and Conservation, or DLCD, conservation, one of those two.
LCDC.
Yes. Yeah.
Is that looking at the code in its entirety or just the downtown?
Just the downtown code. It did touch on the sign code a little bit. It's gonna probably propose actually expanding the downtown zone, but I would say 90% of the work is just the downtown zone. Yes.
I had understood it to be more comprehensive.
I originally thought it was going to be more comprehensive, but it is ended up focusing on the downtown
So
zone.
there might be opportunity for this body to continue to work on.
Correct. And from what I've heard with the governor's focus on housing, there may be funding through DLCD to do updates focused on making housing easier. So there may be more funding available for that.
Yeah, okay.
And where are they in their scope of work? Are they halfway through or 10% done?
75%.
Oh, they are?
Yeah, yeah.
75%.
The commission or the committee's gonna have a meeting in December and then probably have a open house middle of January to show the public what's happening. Have one more meeting late January, early February to finalize it, and then probably present it to the commission in March. It is the tentative timeline to get that ball rolling.
Will we be privy to draft or review?
No, I think first draft you'll officially see is when it's presented to the commission.
You're talking this commission?
Yes, you guys, yes.
All right. Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Yes.
I guess-
And yeah, it is this balance of trying to introduce new codes, but then we're still confined by the downtown zone. So there are things that we've been talking about, like food carts or different allowances, but it's still confined to the downtown zone.
But if we look at the rest of the code and open things up, there might be opportunity to add those similar uses into other areas where we see it appropriate. Potentially.
Great. Yep.
I like your optimism.
Oregon land use laws. Process.
All right, cool. Okay, thank you for that update, and I guess thank you everybody for your hard work tonight, and we'll adjourn the meeting until next time. Have a good evening.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Todd. Thanks, Aaron.
Bye. Thank you, Aaron.
Night.
Have-
Good to
have a
meet you all.
night.
Bye.